It is estimated to be a $1.2 trillion problem. Student loan debt has surpassed every other type of household debt except mortgage debt and become a key economic issue for both Republicans and Democrats. Today, Florida Senator Marco Rubio will introduce a bill which would broaden access to private investors as a way for students to fund their higher education costs in exchange for a percentage of their future earnings. Joining us this morning, Republican Senator Marco Rubio joins us from the Hill. Senator, great to have you back. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
I want to talk about that bill. It's an interesting idea, but we all remember you were one of the senators who questioned Mary Barra when she was on the Hill from GM the other day. Now there's news that NHTSA is fining them a mere $7 grand a day for not answering their questions. What's your thought on that?
Well, look, I think it's important that we have some certainty about what happened there and that a process be set up, not just for victims to be compensated, but to hold accountable those individuals, if there were some within that culture, in that corporation, that allowed this to happen. And I think that there's disturbing evidence there that GM knew about the problem and decided as a business decision not to correct it because they felt it would cost too much money. And that sort of cost-benefit analysis is something that's not tolerable. So I think we should obviously move on evidence and facts. I commend them for bringing in someone to oversee all of this and to conduct an internal investigation with regards to it. But we're going to ultimately need answers sooner rather than later with regards to what occurred at GM.
It's going to be an interesting one to watch and a story that we're just obviously seeing the beginnings of. Talk to me about student loan debt. We got some consumer credit numbers earlier in the week. Yeah. And, you know, households are not spending on credit cards. It's all about college costs that's driving this up. What's the solution?
Well, first of all, let me say that I come at this from a personal perspective. I owed over $100,000 in student loans the day I swore into the Senate just 3 years ago. And so I'm keenly aware of and sensitive to it. At one point in my life, it was the single highest expenditure in our personal budget. What's happening now is in the 21st century, all of the higher and middle income jobs will require some level of higher education, but it's become so expensive. And so a growing number of students are taking on exorbitant student loan debt. And when they graduate, they're not making enough money to make those payments, and it's deterring them or holding them back from starting a family, buying a home, getting on with their lives. It also limits flexibility in terms of what kinds of jobs they can take or even entrepreneurial activity. So our notion is, what other options to the student loans can we create? And here's an existing model that now exists. It's called income share agreements. A student goes to an investment group and says, here's who I am, here's my resume, here's my transcripts, here's what I want to graduate in. Will you invest in me? And when I graduate, I promise over a defined period of time to pay back a certain percentage of my income. For the investment group, they may make a lot more money than they invested in the student. They may lose. That's the risk they take. For the student, they may end up paying more than what they would have, but they may end up paying a lot less. And so the bill is designed to create a legal framework so we can encourage more entities, more investment groups to step into this field and help people with an alternative to the college loans that we currently have.
So the danger that a student graduates and changes fields, I don't know, remains unemployed for a long time, that's just sort of the risk that the investor has to deal with at the front end?
That's right, but that's no different than an investor that decides to invest in a company or in an idea and provide funding and capital for that to start up. You're obviously investing in an individual. Now, not everyone, I think, is going to be an ideal candidate for this. My guess is that you will likely see this more often than not in the graduate level, people going into the STEM fields or medicine or some other profession where there is certainty for the investor that that person is going to find a job and make sufficient money to make their payments. But as I said, like all investment decisions, there is an element of risk here associated with it. But it creates an alternative to the traditional student loan system that we have in place, which in my mind, at its current pace, is simply unsustainable in the long term.
But Senator, isn't it more likely that you're going to cream off, or those investors will cream off the best every year, and the rest will be left to flounder as they are, and in fact you'll reduce mobility within the system, if anything?
Well, I'm not sure that that's the way it would play out. First, I would say that for what you describe as the best, the high GPA students and so forth, they're probably already disproportionately getting their share of scholarship and private funding for their education. Second, I do think it will likely reward those who are going into fields that are highly compensated. And it in fact will serve as an incentive for more students to graduate with degrees that are ultimately turned into employment, as opposed to a large number of students now that are graduating in fields that don't lead to jobs. And that's a real problem in our country as well. I have another bill that deals with that. It's called Right to Know Before You Go. And what it says is that before a student takes on student loan, the institution has to tell them, here's how much graduates from our school with this degree can expect to make when they graduate. so that students can make an informed decision about whether taking out that loan is the right thing to do.
Well, we know it's bad today, and for those of us with young kids, inflating out 16, 15 years, I mean, we're just getting started on this inflation regarding college costs. Senator, thanks so much for your time. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Marco Rubio.